And that leads me to a very disturbing story I referenced last week, but I want to go more in depth, and that's the Florida GOP, the Florida Sucks Caucus, which is essentially almost every elected Republican in Florida. I want to illustrate to you how broken the Republican Party is, how it has not changed one iota, and in fact, it's really gotten worse since Trump came on the scenes because any budding, independent, ideologically principled right that was effective has either been destroyed or subsumed into this just weirdness. So you would think that if you would have, imagine if I would tell you back in 2000, remember Florida was notorious as the 50-50 state, a massive state that was decided by like 550 votes in 2000. But we don't need to go back that far. 2018, as late as 2018, Democrats were favored to win a bunch of statewide races, and DeSantis overperformed and won by the skin of his teeth 30,000, thereby dragging up Rick Scott as for Senate, who won by an even more, narrower margin. Everyone thought he would outperform DeSantis, if you remember, because DeSantis was some unknown Yahoo right-winger, and this guy was a former governor, was a piece of trash. But anyway, comes in there. So this is 6 years ago. This is not ancient history. 6 years minus a few months. And you come in within a few years and you accomplish more culturally, fiscally, education, crime, quality of life, you name it. Turn it into a solid Republican state, win it by 19.5, create super majorities, all this stuff. Even, contrary to reports last week, he failed in these races, but like even starting at least to make inroads in blue areas, taking over the Jacksonville school board. You would think that, we always say you would think that the whole Republican Party nationally would champion this and use it as a paradigm. But at a minimum, you would expect the Florida Republican Party that constantly be touting like they would, you follow the leader, like look at what this guy's doing. And yet, if you look back very carefully, the last couple of years, they've been awfully silent. Some people have noticed this, but you're going to see why it's jarring and glaring at this point. That you look at Disney, he did it all alone. Almost nobody. Again, I'm not always talking about the same person. Here and there, it's one guy. Maybe it's a state elected official. Maybe it's a couple legislators. But mainly the ones that are close to him and allies of him. Right now, he's in a lot of the media's all over him about what he's done to the education. They say there's a scandal at the new college, and then they don't like that he took a guy who lost for the Broward County School Board, which of course it's a deep blue county, and he appointed him to the state Board of Education. Screw it, that's what he does. And then all these guys that he canned as source prosecutors in deep blue areas that are now coming back and winning their primaries because it's a blue area. He's in a lot of fights. He expends a tremendous amount of political capital. This is what a lot of people don't appreciate about him. People forget he had one of the highest approval ratings in the nation before COVID. Okay? And he was willing, he took a huge hit in his approval initially because of what he did. He expends a lot of capital on doing the right thing. And time and again, there's nobody there. We saw it with the AP African American Studies. Nobody would defend him. This is a pitched battle that we've always been trying to go after the anti-white bias in education. He finally does it, and most of them are silent. And then Byron Donalds, the most prominent black Republican in the state, goes and race baits against it. So again and again, we're finding what the hell? And then it culminated with the Super Bowl now, Amendments 3 and 4, making marijuana available at every corner, every part of the state, every time, every place. The only limitation is a certain size amount, and you have to be 21. Otherwise, it's freaking in the Constitution. Okay? It's a constitutional right. Unbelievable. And then on abortion, again, like we've been saying all over, if you look at the language, it will codify as a right every type of abortion. And again, it's not just, you can't abridge, restrict any aspect of it. It is radical beyond belief. There is no European country that has a law like that. And yet, again, utter silence. It's a one-man show. It's a one-man show. And the few people that were able to get comments is only because some of, you guys in the audience bullied them and called their offices, and we went after them on Twitter. So like, oh, no, I oppose Amendment 4. Oppose Amendment. And then, it's not like they're campaigning. They're putting any, I oppose it. Okay, done. And meanwhile, Amendment 3, almost nobody opposes that. I have to say, Matt Gaetz, to his credit, despite being a big marijuana guy, probably uses it a lot too. But he at least has enough sense to know that, no, you can't put that in the Constitution that broadly. So he did say he opposes it. But almost nobody, and in fact, unlike Amendment 4, I don't think there's any prominent Republican supporting it, although Trump was considering that. But Amendment 3, you have Joe Gruters, who is the former state party chair. He's a state senator. Not coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, and we'll get to that in a minute, he was the only Republican in the legislature who endorsed Trump over DeSantis. When I get that. So he's actively campaigning for it. He's bought out by there's mainly one company that's spending money on it, $66 million, by the way. So it's by far the most money being spent on any of the 150 or so ballot initiatives in the country on the ballot in November. It's Amendment 3. The number 2 is Florida Amendment 4. So that's the Super Bowl. The left is dead serious. 150, ballot initiatives in this country. By far, the 2 most expensive are the 2 in Florida. And people are dead. Worse than that, people would call offices like Marco Rubio. Imagine you're the sitting, long-serving senator, and they're creating abortion with no restrictions on time, methods, procedures, qualifications, parental consent, you name it. And you call his office and he says, it's a state issue. I'm a federal official. I don't talk about it. Like, what the hell? So if you remember last week, I or 2 weeks ago, I said, these guys are acting like these big civilization issues are like some local parochial thing. I gave an example of like the days of garbage collection and the circumstances of that. And people are asking them to come like, look, I'm a congressman, I'm a senator, like take it up with your county commissioner or something. And yet, fast forward to late last week, an issue arose that was the epitome of a balancing of equities of a local tiny issue. And nearly every single Republican congressman, both senators, almost all of the state elected officials, the cabinet, DeSantis doesn't select them, they're elected. Like Wilton Simpson, the agriculture secretary, Jimmy Patronis, the CFO, they're like, we're going to fight tooth and nail what DeSantis is going to do to our parks, our state parks, yada, yada, and savage him. And I was like, before I even understood the issue, which I understand it better now, I was like, wait a minute. Something doesn't make sense there. These guys, and God opened up the mouth of Balaam's donkey. It's like, you had nothing to say. And now suddenly you are just lit. I'm like, wow, I didn't know you guys had a pulse. Like, I wasn't sure if there's the equivalent of like an intellectual Viagra we can give you to stimulate you. I mean, nothing could get their attention. So what happened was, and again, I'm just doing this to show you how much the entire GOP of Florida, minus a few people, hate his guts. And if it's like that in Florida, after everything he's done, you could imagine everywhere else. And this is the surgery that needs to be done. It's worse than ever before. So the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, they had this plan. They weren't even up to the point of like public comment yet. It was very far away from being done. And someone leaked the plan to the Sierra Club. Okay, big leftist organization. Usually not something that you would think like, Republicans would join with. Now, you might think, well, DeSantis has been pretty good not having leaks. Yeah, I mean, generally, there's two levels. There's your own executive office of governor, which he hasn't had leaks. But then there's the agencies. Now, he's been great there too, but, inevitably when you start getting to the more liberal agencies, like something like a Department of Environmental Protection, it's impossible that you're not going to have some residual people left that are allied with the left. So, that was kind of their first real problematic leak in 6 years that I know of. And they leak it to the Sierra Club, and they put out this plan. DeSantis is going to go and destroy our beautiful, pristine Florida parks with golf courses, hotels, and pickleball courts. Okay. Now, let's put the pickleball courts aside for a minute. And again, I'm going to go into the weeds. I'm going to get into the weeds on this because you're going to see why it's that important. Not so much the issue is important, but what it brings out in terms of the malfeasance of the entire Republican Party of Florida. So pickleball courts, right off the bat, it's like, that's retarded. Like, why wouldn't you have pickleball courts? You have basketball courts. You have a lot of different things. Pickleball happens to be the fastest growing sport in America by far in Florida. It's like a religion there. So, of course, I mean, like within the same footprint, I even saw the blueprints where like they would be in a parking lot. Like there's literally not a shred of new asphalt or, pavement that's being made. It's within the footprint or whatever. Okay, but the other two, so I thought, and again, this is what misinformation is. I thought, like, I don't know. I don't know how many parks there are, but there's dozens upon dozens of Florida state parks. Each one would be dotted with golf courses. And like, I pictured hotels. You use the word hotel, you think of, I don't know, like the Hilton or a Marriott. I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Okay. I don't know why you would do that, but it's like, on the one hand, you want to attract more people to the parks. On the other hand, I understand that there's a concern in Florida of overdevelopment, but that's what they're playing off of. It turns out that what the story was, so let's divide each one. The golf course was one park. It was one park. Jonathan Dickinson Park, I think in Martin County. No one goes there. It's nothing but like an Australian scrub brush. There's nothing to look at. It has a bunch of dilapidated it was like old military base with a bunch of dilapidated old slabs of concrete. It's actually, a lot of it's not very nice. So they would revitalize again within the footprint. And it wasn't, again, this wasn't like a DeSantis administration agenda of like active hyper development of parks. And you're going to see, actually, it was nothing. It was in the weeds decisions that they make every year that every other state does that shouldn't even be news. But there was this group, Folds of Honor, that would honor Black military veterans. They actually wanted to make the golf course. It was their idea. So the state was indulging it and was possibly going to give them permission and give the land over to or allow it to be used that. And this Congressman Brian Mast, who's from the area, just went nuts. Our pristine parks. And again, it was one park, one place. The way he was talking about it, it appears like he's never even been there. Doesn't add anything. But again, whether, okay, you disagree, the locals oppose it. This was not a done deal. Okay, so, that's a very hyper-local issue. Fine, you don't do it. Not a big deal. And indeed, with the outrage that they manufactured, Folds of Honor pulled out of it. So it's not going to happen. And then the hotels, they're not hotels. There's no Marriott. It's a lodge. Like, these like log cabin lodges and cabins. Now, I don't know what state you're from. I know Virginia. I know West Virginia. A good, maybe half the states that they do that. That's what they have. And indeed, in Florida, they already have it. Now, this wasn't like some super... It wasn't even like, let's see how we could update our parks to really take it to the next level. which, done rightly is not a bad thing to do. That's not even what they're doing. It was literally just a matter of they had 2.3 million bookings last year in the parks, and they had a problem. They were consistently booked up, and people were turned away. They couldn't. So they're like, in 9 parks, they were going to build some more cabins. Okay, that's pretty par for the course. Okay, nice cabins in the woods, within the footprint. I mean, literally, this would never be news. Okay? That was, and it was a proposal that Sierra Club got a hold of, jumped ahead of everyone, spun people up, played off of this, general concern from Floridians that there's too much overdevelopment. And these guys are like, so Wilton Simpson is leading it, the Secretary of Agriculture, are beautiful, pristine. They're meant for hiking and canoeing. And it's like everyone knows you have all sorts of things at state parks. They have like pools and water slides at a lot of Florida state parks and a lot of places in the country. It's like, okay, it's not places where a bunch of like deer and manatee like thrive. Let's face it, parks are for people and they disrupt wildlife all the time, even when they're done well. That's a reality. That's life, and most of us agree with it. But they retroactively made it like if you're not there and don't know Florida, you would think Florida has something unique about its parks, that it's just a bunch of kind of like Greenland that you just could maybe walk through and maybe canoe in a canal or something, and there's no amenities there, and they're just gonna like develop the hell out of it. And when in fact, again, it was one golf course and one place that's dilapidated, and then just some more cabins adding to the existing 2.3 million bookings that you have everywhere. And then, side by side with basketball courts, go have pickleball courts, okay? But, whatever. That's it. That's what it was. And these bastards are like everywhere. And I'm like, something doesn't make sense here. I'm like, I'm not from there. I don't know. There might be that's a hyper local thing, balancing of equities. You get input. It's not ideological. I'm like, I don't care. You might have a reason to oppose it. But I'm like, something is really contrived and unnatural here. Think about being a guy like Wilton Simpson, the agricultural secretary there, or Brian Mast, the congressman from Martin County. You're so worried about the quality of pristineness of Florida state parks. Now, ask yourself this. What is a bigger problem to the quality and beauty? Again, they're speaking to very intangible things. Some pickleball courts and cabins in the existing state parks, or inundating every state park with weed and pot smoking, which that's going to particularly be a hangout for that. I mean, remember, the only limitation is the grams and the 21 years of age. That means that you could have it at universities. Oh, Daniel, no. The state will regulate it. That's what like some of these people say. The problem is if you make it a constitutional right, it's out of reach. If there's no limiting language in the amendment, it means it's full proof. So, wait a minute. And Joe Gruters, of course, anytime there's an opportunity to bash DeSantis, he's there like a fly on crap. He's like, yeah, DeSantis, he's doing all this stuff. I mean, vicious. Like, it's so, and then the media is like salivating. It's bipartisan. They're taking down DeSantis. He's like developing the state. And again, it's all a goddamn lie. I'm like, wait a minute. We have Amendment 3, quality of life. So that's the first layer of hypocrisy. Quality of life. Unbelievable. You have nothing to say in the case of Wilton Simpson. In the case of Joe Gruters, he's one of the active campaigners supporting it. Brian Mast won't say a word about it. And then there's the aspect of these guys that won't say a word about Amendment 4, abortion, which is the top issue for 50 years. Oh, but yeah, it's like some sort of local thing. But you're going to worry about a golf course in one part of an abandoned state park, couple more lodges at 9 parks, and damn pickleball fields? It's unbelievable. And then there's another, and by the way, so one of the people who wrote a letter on the golf course, so Rubio was on the letter, Rick Scott was on the letter. Rick Scott, by the way, is governor had a much more aggressive plan, not just in one place, to put golf courses on state parks. He was actually going to do it. Rick Scott, as governor, was going to do it shamelessly. So we know for sure he's not offended by it. I think you all know what's going on. The Republican Party hates people like you and me more than anyone, more than the Democrats do. And that's why they hate him, because they hate that ideology. And again, here's the beauty. Unlike the left, and unlike these people who are Trump cultists that will not say a word about him, I'm totally fine. Like, I was very open when I saw, I was like, yeah, maybe DeSantis made a mistake here. I still think you're not negotiating in good faith. But, I have no problem disagreeing with him on something. Then I looked into it. I was like, what the heck? That's what the issue is? And there's another aspect of this. Everyone knows DeSantis, for a very conservative person, is on the spectrum. He's very much towards a conservationist. He actually embraces Teddy Roosevelt. There's a lot we don't like about Teddy. He was a father of progressivism. A lot of these ballot initiatives actually literally came from him at the turn of the century. But, he is very much, and he has jousted with a lot of the farming interests and the sugar lobby over some development issues with the Everglades. Wilton Simpson, the Secretary of Agriculture, he is in the back pocket of Roger Stone and the sugar lobby, and is on the other side of DeSantis on conservation of the Everglades. Yet this bastard, this schmuck, is worried about a damn pickleball field and some extra cabins? Are you freaking kidding me? So I think you all understand what's going on here. They're not bothered by some hyper-local thing with a park. They smelt blood. They hate his guts. And retroactively, now we understand why they won't help with Amendment 3 and Amendment 4, even though those things stand, particularly Amendment 3, in contradiction to everything they're saying about preserving recreation and beauty of the state. And why they were never with him on almost any major fight. Really, of his entire governorship. He did it all alone. COVID, Disney, education, crime. That is how broken the Florida Republican Party is. All these people that rode his coattails. You understand how bad things are if we don't build, if we don't do surgery now, if we don't start really pushing for conventions and caucuses over primaries, and really start beefing up the state freedom caucuses. I'm going to be in Dallas next week for the first annual get-together of the state freedom caucuses. You understand that at this point, if nothing changes, when DeSantis leaves office in a little more than 2 years, you understand Florida will go back to exactly the same gay, retarded party it was under Rick Scott. You understand that. I mean, you're either going to have Byron Donalds running, who has a lot of personal issues and race baited against DeSantis. You have Matt Gaetz, who I guess ideologically is the best, but man, a lot of personal problems there. Or Wilton Simpson definitely wants to run, and he's a corporate whore, but man, he's somehow against development when it comes to this. Do you understand how insidious that is? That you don't join on any fight, including the biggest quality of life fight you'll ever have going on right now, and a couple of them are supportive of it, but then you'll viciously attack him, something that you would do privately. If you had a unified party, you deal with, hey, park issue, we're worried maybe those will bring in too many out-of-staters, or I don't know, whatever. Honestly, I can't articulate it. I thought I could last week. Now that I understand the plan, how limited it was in scope and where it came from, I don't even understand how you could articulate opposition to it in its own right. But whatever, even if you did, it's not coming from good faith. It has nothing to do with conservation. It has nothing to do with the beauty of the parks. It has to do with the fact that these people hate and resent DeSantis. And I hate to say it, but I think you all know a lot of this is being directed by the most important figure who's a resident of Florida. And that gets me back to where we started with Trump in the presidential election. Look, voting for him over Harris is different than excusing him and downright supporting this malfeasance. And I do want to say this. Again, I still think probably on net, when you look at what France is doing, arresting the CEO of Telegram, this is the sort of thing we're going to see more of if the Democrats win, because they'll be emboldened that despite all their failures, they're able to win an election. I don't want Harris to win. But A, that's all the more reason why you need to stop excusing Trump's pathetic campaign and run a proper campaign. But B, I do want to disagree, and I'm going to disagree with my colleague Steve Dace here, and I'm glad to debate it with him on his show, maybe on Wednesday when I come on. But I just saw Steve putting out a lot, and he said this a lot, on Twitter, and this is just an academic debate. Steve makes a very valid point that, look, whatever you think of Trump, let's face it, the Republican Party sucked for years, and we've always had this problem. And, Steve's like, look, I opposed Mitt Romney before it was cool, and, we had the same problem then. And he's absolutely right. But there is one unique thing that is very different about Trump that we need to recognize. Again, not to say to the extent that you're not going to vote for him, but to the extent that, boy, we have a big problem regardless of the results of November that we need to start building towards. There was never a person that was able to get the core right, to stand down on so many core issues that you're now going to oppose DeSantis just to mollify Trump, or you're going to stand down on as a Florida Republican on Amendment 4 on abortion on demand just to placate him. That is what we've never had. Yeah, you had all the time, like Republicans like Mitt Romney, John McCain, we need to be socially liberal, but we always had a right working against that. Trump has a unique ability to get the people the most likely to fight it to either stand down or downright support bad issues. That's what we need to divide. That's my point. My point is like, look, you got to divorce your decision, your pragmatic decision to vote for whatever Republican you have over whatever Democrat, versus saying you are okay with that you're going to join with that before and after the election. No, that we need to right now start building that surgery, because I'm telling you, if we don't fundamentally change the way we are doing business with the Republican Party, well, I got a Florida GOP 6 years into DeSantis to sell you, and it ain't very pretty. So we got a lot more coming up. We'll have some guests on later this week.